Hello, welcome to the world of Word.
Coming up, another word in your attic.
And if you enjoy this, visit our Patreon to find out more about our exclusives and our general work of national importance.
The link is in the notes below. And now, on with the show.
Word in your attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another edition of Word in Your Attic, and welcome also to our guest this morning, the esteemed Six Music broadcaster, stalwart indeed of the radio station, Gideon Coe. Gideon, lovely to see you. How's
Very
things
nice
your
to see
end?
you both this morning.
I'd say you look like you're sort of lit by a kind of halo of Christmas lights.
Oh, so I am. Yes, so this is it. Come on in my kitchen.
Come on, very good. Very
It's going to
good.
be raining outdoors.
5 points there.
So apologies, it's not from an attic. I do have an attic, but it would be a bit complicated at this time. I wouldn't disturb the 15-year-old. He's not going to be up until at least 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Sorry,
noon. Yeah.
Sorry, it's not from the shed either, which is where I keep a lot of stuff and I do a lot of work. But at the moment, it's difficult to get any sort of signal there, so it wouldn't work either.
And that's where you broadcast. You've got all the expensive mics and yeah.
All I have, I say all I have because I can't really work out how it works, is a small recording device into which a very good BBC microphone on loan, or it's all on loan, goes, and then a pair of headphones, and then I can record links in pretty good quality. There's quite good soundproofing in the shed as well. And so for the last 4 months, we've been relying on that, plus sending all sorts of WeTransfer files. And it's all been very digital in terms of the output. Though the producer who puts it together from his home in North London, he has a capacity to record from vinyl onto the playout system. So a combination of that, then he cobbles it all together. It takes an awful long time. It has to be scripted and ridiculously back-timed.
It must do.
But we're getting by.
That must be the most labour-intensive way of doing a radio programme with music ever.
I don't like to complain about it because
no, I'm sure you're not complaining at all. But to the listener, it sounds the same. But by God, it's a lot more difficult if you do it that way, isn't it? Than turning it up in the studio.
As you know, the joy of putting together a music programme is to do with the freedom you have to do it. When you do it live, you can move stuff around. You can accommodate that. When you pre-record it, you listen to music in different ways. So you say, well, this is okay, but I actually need a fader here, so it needs to be a bit longer. So I can't play that just yet. And it just at certain points, because it's all in chunks from time to time, you find yourself making ridiculous decisions that you wouldn't normally make to say, okay, I'll put that one in there because it fits, and I quite like it, and it fits. And from time to time, you have to do that.
Where are you, Gideon?
I'm in Kensal Green.
Okay, fine.
And have you had a chance to dig through and find any old records and bits and bobs that you could show us?
I have indeed.
Story attached.
To my shame, and the records I have, I've got plenty of them still. Many have been lost in slightly sort of nomadic times, and they're not properly ordered. Let's get that out of the way now.
Not at all.
They need work. Occasionally,
we all understand. We're all guilty of this.
They need work beyond that. But I'm also the keeper of the family singles. And I can't quite remember how this happened because obviously there were 4 brothers and we all left home gradually. And the singles stayed there. And eventually, I think my mum had enough of them and they've ended up with me.
Really? Oh, that's
which is handy. And some LPs as well.
So are your brothers resentful of what you've ended up with, or are they just accept that you've got it?
No, my youngest brother got my grandparents' sofa, which was much coveted, so that's okay. The rest of them, no. Well, if they ever want to come around and say, look, I want to reclaim the single that I bought in 1979, then they can do it. Fair enough, I'll let them do it. But nobody's tried to do that so far. Nobody wants to do that.
Fine.
And a brief tangent, your dad is the great Tony Coe, who's the saxophone player in the Humphrey Lyttelton band and all sorts of stuff in the 50s and 60s.
He also appears, I was going to talk about him, he also
go on.
See this? Can you see that yet?
It's a Chrysalis record. I can't see it's upside down.
I've seen the name of it, yeah.
Okay, this is Brian Prothero's hit record.
Oh, Pinball. Oh, right.
on which the old man plays a saxophone solo, and this was given to me. It's in the wrong sleeve, as you can see. This is the sort of chaos I live in. I'm sorry. By my mother. I was unaware of it, and I was probably about 8 or 9, saying, because they divorced when I was about 3. She said, "Your dad plays on this, and he appears elsewhere as well." But like, he also appears as well as you say, Mark, playing with Humphrey Littleton and all sorts of bands. Clark Bowen, big band as well, throughout the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. He appears on certain records because obviously he would do sessions for particular records. Perhaps most notoriously in terms of what people want to talk to him about, he's on Solid Air.
That's right.
Oh, right, of course.
And journalists from time to time have contacted me and said, "Can we talk to your dad about working with John Martyn?" And I say, "Okay, I'll put you in touch." But I know the answer will probably be, it was a one-off session, maybe 2 days. I think Danny Thompson was there. Can't really remember anything else about it. I don't particularly like it. That's more,
riveting interview. Yeah.
There's quite a lot of that. And he, and when he talks about, he appears on the McGear album as well, and he talks about working with Paul McCartney, saying to him, and this is the only thing the only story he tells about this is simply saying, Paul McCartney said to me, "The trouble with you jazzers is you can never play the same thing twice."
Point of pride, I'm sure. Yeah.
I think that the great man has a point, but that's rankled with the old man ever since.
Right. So you never sat down with him and said, let's think of a good anecdote about Brian Prothero. Let's think about one about John Martyn. You can just trot it out. People will be perfectly happy with it. You know.
I'm not asked about Prothero, actually. I mean, the Prothero, Dimble is an interesting story in itself because lyrically it seems quite far-fetched, but then reading about it, there really was this flat in, I think, Covent Garden with fleas everywhere and a cat that's eaten the bread and some such, and it did exist. And at some point, he wrote about it and recorded it, and it was a hit record.
It was a hit and never followed, was it, at all?
No, I think he made another couple of LPs. The good people at, I can't remember which reissue company, it's through Cherry Red, have put out a recent sort of double CD collection of the Prothero recordings, which I've yet to investigate beyond Pimble.
Right. Very good. What else you got there? Go on.
Dad also gave me this. I should say this is more recognisable. If there's a first record that came into my collection, it would be this.
Oh,
that is Bugs
Is
Bunny.
it Bugs Bunny? I can't say. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And the Bunny Hop and the Bus song. There's a bit on the back where you could colour it in, which at some point one of us
did.
One of the 4 brothers. And I remember this being this, and there was a Scooby-Doo record. This is 1973. So this entered the house, and it was very, because up until that point, the records in the house were slightly strange ones you didn't understand that my mum and my stepdad had, though later we got to appreciate all the Cream LPs and Spooky Tooth and Delaney and Bonnie and those sort of records. Another one we'll get to later on as well. But when this arrived, we felt like we had sort of ownership of the record player for the first time. Via Bugs Bunny. And then via the power, I don't have it handy here, but via the power of my brother having enough pocket money to buy a record in 1974, we had This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us as the first single that came in to the house via one of the 4 brothers. And we're off and running from then. Obviously, that's still, it's not in great nick, I'm afraid.
What kind of record player did you have in your home at this time? You can remember, was it a music centre or a stereo or whatever?
It was floor-based. There were 2 speakers, but they weren't always plugged in properly, the other side of the stereo speaker. So for a lot of the time, for example, when I listened to California Dreaming, first of all, I only heard half the vocal. So the split sound,
just the mummers,
separation wasn't happening. So there was an built-in speaker here, another speaker over there, sometimes plugged in. My stepdad, as part of his, I presume, woodwork project when he was about 16, and made a really beautiful LP case in which a lot of the records lived, and some of them were elsewhere in a different container. And they were guarded, and we were told to, the Stylus next to a phone bill was the most expensive thing.
It was.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was.
I remember my father saying, "Don't scratch the stylus. You would have to get a new one." It was exactly the same way as they used to say, "Get off the telephone. Who's paying for this call?" Those were the priorities, weren't they?
I mean, how much was a stylus? It was a lot of money, wasn't it? It was like 30 quid or something, wasn't it?
It was. It's impossible to judge or compare in those days. It was an awful lot of money, yes. 30 quid.
Well, I can't remember. It was a lot more than buying some LPs. So if you needed to replace a stylus, it would really depress the life out of you. You had to do that because you weren't going to get any pleasure out of it. But you simply had to replace it. It was extraordinary.
Yeah, and so they was looked after. We were trusted from time to time, and the records remained relatively unscathed as a result of that. But then when we got older, and hats off to my mum and stepdad for getting hold of a very heavy old radiogram, which was moved into the basement where we had a sort of our own area. And this didn't have a very good stylus. I'm sure it had an inbuilt record destroying thing, but it had the old top pull down
auto changer.
Selector. Yeah.
So we play our LPs, we play our singles there, and that's where we sort of set up shop. And again, I mean, buying records, unless you had a viable paper round, was not that easy. But my brother and I would put together our pocket money, which came to exactly 65p, boys and girls, and we would, and that was enough for a single from Disc and Tape in Bristol, which is where we lived at the time. So we'd get hold of records from there, and until the point where an older brother decided that he'd take control of it, so it wouldn't be a democratic decision anymore, and he just decided what to buy, and that was punk rock. Basically, that's what happened then.
Well, he got your money and then made a decision how it was going to be spent. That's absolutely, and you put up with that. I mean,
because we'd agreed to. I can't remember when he bought Holidays in the Sun. That wasn't the agreement. He went.
And that was a bad decision too.
he was
what a rotten record.
I can't think what else we'd have agreed to get. It wasn't that.
I've never heard of this agreeing to buy a record by committee. This is a new
well, at some point, it was a relief to find independence and not rely on his 40p and my 25p. to buy a
I see. So he had more. He had a greater share of the.
Right. So he got the decision. Casting vote.
Based on that, I mentioned my big brother. I'm just going to show this. He at one point bought all the Jam singles. Picture cover, obviously. He bought them all in one go from a shop in Cancery when we were on holiday there before we moved back there. Big complicated family history. Called Cancery Rock, which fingers crossed is still there. And this is a cautionary tale because they were all in lovely condition until he had an argument with the stepdad and threw ice cream across the room. And, a certain amount of justice here. It landed right on the bit of where the singles were, where his Jam singles were. So they were all ice cream damaged for a while. And this one's probably the best condition cover since. So they are ice cream damaged.
Can a record recover from ice cream damage? Probably not, can it? Sugar,
still
fluff?
plays nicely.
All right, okay.
Well, somebody was telling me you can get just about anything off a record with the amount of care. Like paint you can get off if you really nurture it and work at it. With your elbow.
Well, some people still swear by fairy liquid and water, don't they? You come across some people who say that with LPs. I've never done it myself, but some people say you can do it.
Wait, could it do damage if you tried it? I'm not sure. I didn't want to risk it. You could risk it on a less loved LP, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
I'm just going to mention books in passing, if I may.
Yeah.
Because you've been responsible for a few collectively. And I was bought the Guinness Book of Hit singles when I was a kid, about 1982 edition, and I devoured it. I haven't got it now, I don't know where it is now. And I was bought there was a clever thing called a rock and roll diary, which was like an A4 hardback book, where each day had a bit of rock history and your own bit that you could put in it if you're an aspiring schoolboy musician. So I remember sticking stuff in that about busking and stuff like that, in and around Scott Walker's birthday, whatever else was in on a particular day. And I was also given this by my mother early on, which is the book of rock quotes.
Yes. So I've got that here, I think.
It's edited by Jonathan Green, and it's weird. So there's one quote. I was just rereading this for purposes of today recently. I'd never heard a Randy Newman record when I was 14, 15. I don't think so. More fool me. But there's a quote in there that stuck with me. It just says, Randy Newman, in a word, I'm boring. And I thought, what a thing to say. He's very self-effacing, and what do you know? You listen to his amazing records, and that comes across. He's anything but boring in terms
He's
of
absolutely anything but boring.
And there are loads of Elvis Costello quotes.
Because he talks a lot.
And he's highly quotable.
He talks in quotes. He talks in quotes.
He does.
I could never imagine a lot of people wanting this ugly geek in glasses ramming songs down their throats. This is what he says.
Yeah.
But, again,
the Book of Rock quotes was a great tool for radio DJs, wasn't it? You know, you got it by the microphone.
Yes.
If Short has something to say about,
So all those things that flourished before the internet. All those things that nowadays you go to the internet, you just put Debbie Harry in there, there's 50 quotes pop up. In those days, you had to have a book.
Yeah, or you learn them by rote. One of the two.
Or you learn them by rote.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true.
That's been an interesting thing about lockdown and the way and pre-recorded programs. The reliance on interactivity, live interaction via social media and text messages and emails has gone. So it's almost gone back to old. I mean, I still use emails sent some days before that then appear on future programs. But it's changed the discipline a bit, and it's good in a way because it means I think it's very easy to be too reliant on that sort of stuff just to fill.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure. It always kills me when I turn on the radio first thing in the morning. Not like 5 Live or whatever. We want to hear what you think. No, you really don't want to hear it. But really, you just want something to respond to, so you don't feel as if you just moving from one item to another.
Yeah, please provide us with material.
Yes, give us a free show. Give us free editorial. Precisely.
I've got to have something to say between this record. I really like this record. I like the next one, but I mean that's all I've got to say about it. Well, that's actually just get on with it.
That was this is. Yes.
Terry Wogan ran an entire career at the end, didn't he? Out of getting reactions from the listeners. It's brilliant.
Yeah, so when it flows, it's great like that. But it's been interesting to do it in a different way for a while. Where should we go to next? What would you fancy seeing? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you this. And this is very clumsy, but it says you probably can't see that. This is as you can see, an empty.
It's an empty back.
Really?
Yeah.
And you just guessed what it could be.
I've got the same one.
We've all got that record. Yeah.
And what I've actually written on this as an aid memoir is not pin-ups because. At a certain point in the early 1980s, my mum's copy of Pin-Ups, David Bowie, disappeared. And we were all quizzed about it, the 4 brothers, and knew nothing about it.
You're brought in for questioning, were you?
We were brought in for questioning. How has Pin-Ups disappeared? And everything else is left intact, So, the years go by, it was mentioned from time to time and never solved. And then, about 2 or 3 years ago, I received an email on the programme and from somebody from Cancery, and he said, by the way, I've got your mum's copy of Pin-Ups. Your older brother swapped it for, I think it was Magazine's LP, Real Life, and I've still got it. I wonder if your mum wants it back. He then added, and I'll keep this for a family audience, he then added, by the way, I also lost my virginity listening to it. And at that point, I said, well, I don't actually want it back.
Fine, keep it.
But it was very, and then I told my mum, I said, you remember that copy of Pin-Ups? Well, turned out Simon did swap it for another record. So that's where it went. And I can get it back. And she said, no, it's okay. If he wants to keep it, he can keep it. But that's the power of radio.
It's the long arm of justice will catch up with you eventually, won't it? Via the radio or the internet or whatever.
Yeah,
that's extraordinary that he'd gone off with it. And it's a classic case of, I'm going to swap this thing, which everybody likes, for something that I think I might like, It's
Yes.
the kind of the new happening thing. You know, it's always what people do, isn't it?
And then pretend I didn't know what happened to the record at all. Search me, I've got no idea.
I'm going to swap a record that isn't mine for one that
Absolutely.
I might like.
Yeah.
I suppose in our youth we may do such things. Here's a record that I bought as a result of hearing it via my stepdad's dad, actually, because he didn't have many records.
Oh,
that's a great record. Fabulous record.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we love that.
And the thing is, though radio now is very segmented, and you can at any point via internet radio, via online radio, digital radio, find extraordinary, and I'll only use this word once, eclectic radio stations that play literally anything around the world. I mean, you're unlikely to hear Flanders Swann, I would say. Where would it crop up now? I'm not sure.
It wouldn't have.
It's kind of gone, isn't it? It just belongs to another world. Doesn't have any relevance.
But if you play, in particular the Slow Train, this is on.
Oh, it's a work of genius.
Absolutely. On any
absolute masterpiece.
It would work on any program, on any station, at any time. I say, slip it in, they'll love it. It is a work of genius. I'm so glad. And one of those, and there's a question here: will this be passed on to my son and beyond? With difficulty, I'd say, but I'll do my best to.
Well, no, Mark and I often talk about those things, and Flanders and Swann and those Peter Sellers records that were made around about the same time by George Martyn. You know, it's a whole area of creativity was just gone.
Yes,
because it was done for the LP record, and those LPs used to get played on the radio quite a lot. I think because they were just relief from music, weren't they? You had 1 hour of family favourites or whatever, most of which was music. And they would chuck in a couple of comedy records, just for variety.
And if you listen to those Peter Sellers records, the detail of sound effects, the amount of overdubbing, all that stuff that George Martyn did, that he then immediately moved on to the Beatles, which is really interesting. That kind of the idea that any sound you want, I can synthesize for you.
I wonder if there's, and Mark Lewison has probably written a few chapters on this as we speak, but I wonder if there was any evidence of the Beatles hearing some of those recordings saying we'd like a bit of that.
Sure.
They were aware of the Goons and Peter Sellers.
They
they probably didn't know he was the same guy, but they would have known over a period of time, I'm sure. Well, Kenneth Womack's written that 2-part book about George Martyn, and I think is the overall title Sound Pictures or something like that, Pictures in Sound, and that is what George Martyn did. And he did it in comedy, he did it in music as well. Very different from most producers.
I'm just going to, where are we at now? I don't want to impinge too much on your time, but I'm enjoying myself. Are we okay?
Fine.
Carry on.
We are too. We talk about Flanders and Swann all day. Don't worry. Carry on.
Absolutely. I'm going to mention the Clash in passing. Don't roll your eyes. But that's only because it's...
Dave and I known as being non-Clash supporters. We did run a big debate on Word magazine once. I remember actually about whether or not the Clash was the only group we could think of that had no good singers. And it got a lot of lively response. Actually, probably from you.
I file this my whole Clash thing, as I call it, which is a bit more. I like to think a bit more sober and. Wheat and chaff type now, but I still love them for all that. Buying a record such as this, I didn't buy it when it came out. This is Complete Control.
Oh, okay.
50p. It's a wonderful, wonderful record, extraordinary single. I bought it later on because I don't remember being in the hit parade when I was 10, so I wasn't even be aware of it then. But some years later, I buy it, and then the weird thing, and here's a copy of London Calling. I'm only trying London Calling because. I can't find Sandinista, which is the record I favour. We can debate that on a whole other program.
Oh, really? That's
all 6 sides of it. You're
very well, warts and all. And this, buying these records, owning these records, and then later in life meeting people who made these records is, when you look back at it, quite mind blowing. It's a very strange thing, isn't it? I mean, you've experienced this as well.
Yeah.
And finding them to be good company as well. not perfect human beings, but really, really interesting to talk to, and really and pleasant and interesting and very, very funny. And they all work.
I tell you, I was thinking about London Calling recently. I'm not the world's biggest Clash fan, although I kind of like some of their stuff. And I can't think of any other example in popular music where somebody has gone from such a crap record as Give 'Em Enough Rope to such a good record as London Calling so quickly. Is that right?
Give 'Em Enough Rope's got Stay Free on it. It's got an amazing end.
You're on thin ice here.
Oh dear. Okay.
Sandy Pearlman's production, looking back on it, was...
It's a terror. It sounds awful. Sounds awful. Whereas London Calling suddenly sounds utterly confident.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And utterly realise, and you can't work out how that happened. It suddenly swings, whereas previous record hadn't done at all.
The answer could be in the man who said there are only 2 Phil Spectors, and I'm one of them, and that's Guy Stevens.
Guy Stevens. Or Bill Price, or whoever engineered it.
Yeah.
Probably as
that
much
combination.
Yeah.
I think a coming together of the group as well, combined with those people overseeing it and where they recorded it as well, it all gelled. But I think, Guy Stevens' contributions to that, even if it's just creeping up behind them and shouting as they talk.
Yeah, whatever it was, it worked. It worked.
It made a difference.
And it's the confidence, and it's also the halo effect of a great opening track.
Yes.
If you've got a great opening track, it carries you through for the next 3 tracks almost, although it doesn't need to in that case. And
and that should always be the case, shouldn't it? You put your open has to be good. You don't hide it at track 6,
no,
5 or 6.
You don't.
As some may try to do.
Yeah, it does happen occasionally. Well, probably less so nowadays. People are a lot more scientific about those things nowadays, aren't they? Yeah. Everybody, record company has a view. Everybody has a view. You put the singles at the front of it, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, go on. Carry on.
Here's a record
De La Soul. Okay.
It's a record I thought I'd lost, and I'm glad I still have, because 3 Foot High Rising is quite hard to get hold of for reasons of...
they own it themselves, don't they?
I'm not sure where we are with that, but for a while it wasn't reissued because none of the, as I understand it, none of the samples have been signed off.
Oh.
And therefore, it's got a few, or indeed, from time to time, I'm not sure what appears on the sleeve. Precious little in terms of that, but as I understand it, was so when you look on your Discogs and wherever, it's still relatively pricey to get hold of a vinyl copy of 3 Feet High and Rising. Yeah, recent research has shown that on my part. Yeah, and I was delighted to find it the other day when, of course, I was looking for something else, and there's a lesson there in good management of records. I'm going to show you now something which I think you'll both probably reckon, with prompting, know where this came from. Okay, I'm going to try and put it close to you so you can read it.
Oh, right.
Now, this is if you'd like to name the band, you can. But you know,
is it Spinal Tap?
It's Spinal Tap. It must be Spinal Tap. Stumpy, of course. Lukewarm water. Fire and Ice. St Hubbins. Yes.
As a history lesson to those who weren't aware of Greater London Radio, GLR, in the basement at the former BBC station for London, there was a live music room, a studio, which produced some very, very good sessions over the years.
Yes.
Despite creaky equipment and a piano that everybody complained about, which I think was last retuned about 1988. And as part of it, they were encouraged at some point to sign a drum skin. And then the drum skins would adorn all the walls, all around the basement down there, if you venture down. And when it was cleared out in preparation for changes, within decent haste, basically everything was up for grabs. So it wasn't quite, last days of Saigon.
Chopper on the roof.
No, it wasn't you that interviewed them then.
No, but I remember that they arrived, and of course, I remember them arriving, and they arrived completely in character.
Were they dressed in character?
Yeah,
as well?
Dressed in character, completely in character, and went on to do the whole thing, of course, in character. I mean, the only time I saw them in the flesh, I saw them play when they played Glastonbury in 2009, 2010, and then they were backstage. If you see somebody backstage at Glastonbury, musicians, they'll ignore you generally. unless you have met them at some point. I've never met Spinal Tap, but of course, as they walk past, they were going, "All right, hello, hello."
Their English accents are just impeccable, aren't they?
And they even did that bit in character. So St Hubbins and Smalls were quite avuncular and nice, and Nigel Tuffin was a bit moody. Couldn't be bothered. And they were extraordinary in character. The tales of the basement sessions at GLR are amazing, and some of them more poignantly than others, because there were some great performances down there. There was the time when the remaining members of the band came there in about 94, 95, and they weren't in a great way. And Johnny Walker was in conversation with Levon Helm and said to him, this is after the first number, and he said, how about another tune? And they had this sort of rambling conversation, and Levon Helm says, no, I thought we'd just shoot the breeze a bit. And Johnny says, well, you can shoot the breeze if you like, I've got a programme to do. And so I went away from the interview at that time. And that was it. I don't think Levon, the great man, was that bothered at that stage. I don't know what they were doing. They're doing a session at 12:30 at lunchtime. With Rick Danko.
That was the thing. We're talking to, I can't remember who else I was talking to. Peter Curran. We had Peter Curran on one of these. And we're talking about GLR. And there was so many of those people. I mean, people like the band, a classic example, were not that celebrated at the time, in the middle of the 90s. Nobody was going around going, these are the great icons of American music. You know, there's no reverence for them. People like GLR were the only people who were interested in them. You know, so you'd have these legends just drifting through the place absolutely all the time.
Usually at a time when they're incredibly cooperative too, weren't they? Because they were so pleased that someone takes some interest in them.
Yeah, exactly. And that should have been the case for the band. And it's, you know, we just went down. I remember for that session, I just went down, and it was one of those occasions where I just stared through the glass because I just wanted to see them. I just want to see, well, there they are. I mean, I don't really mind that much what they are. That was a bit like a zoo thing, I suppose. It was an odd thing to do on my part. But just to see them there, albeit in not the best circumstances.
Yeah.
But there was another band called Servatron I was reminded about the other day, who were not quite in the same league as the band, but had their moments. And
we're trying to resist the temptation to say who, so they probably are the same league. But yeah, go on.
They were their thing was playing sort of quite long instrumentals, and they were dressed as robots. So that's pretty good, isn't it, for a start? And Robert Elms, one song went on far too long. It went past the appointed time for the travel news, which is always terrible at GLO. So Robert, rather than just going to the travel news, Robert went to them and said, "Oh, sorry, fellas, you're going to have to end it here because we've got to get to the travel news." To which one of the leads in the microphone said, "Do not worry, we know the cars. The cars are our friends. They will understand." And so they carried
that's
on.
enormously useful.
Oh, yeah, very good.
So they carried on, yes.
So have you got a greatest record ever made?
Well,
a suggestion for?
If I had the single copy, which I do have in the shed somewhere, I know it's been the refrain of "I Say a Little Prayer," that the Aretha Franklin version, that would be the greatest single ever made.
Right.
I would say it's absolute perfection.
He's going to come up with give him enough rope by the Clash in a minute. He's going to do this.
I'm surprised it isn't Kraftwerk. It's not Kraftwerk, I can tell. You're a major cyclist. I would have thought it'd been Tour de France. But go on, let's see.
They're all great. These are all great records, but for sentimental reasons, also because I love the records, and I would choose any number of his. And ironically, of course, I've got a vinyl copy of this somewhere. I've got a CD copy, but the real vinyl copy that I treasure is my mother's, and I haven't swapped it for a new wave LP yet. And it was one she got from a draft dodger in '69, I presume. This is the outtake picture from it, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Fantastic.
Okay.
What a great record.
In terms of
To Be Alone with Youth, I Threw It All Away. What great songs.
And also, I just love it's the brevity of it, the simplicity of it, which was more or less what he was after even after John Wesley Harding, to do a record such as that and job done. It sounds like he's really enjoying it, and after all the pressure of pre-bike crash and all that. It seems like he's got his mojo back in that sense. And it's interesting that not that John Wesley Harding is a great record, by the way, but it's interesting listening to the bootleg series, because one of the great outtakes in that is Johnny Cash basically suggesting they do Girl from the North Country, and then Bob Dylan saying, I only know the bit about Coat So Warm, I can't remember any of the rest of it. So this is all being recorded. They're going through it, and Johnny Cash is reteaching him Girl from the North Country with a view to this. They talk about great openers. I love that. Every moment of the opener on that particular record, and that particular version. So yes, I think just for today I would choose that particular LP.
It's such a good record because it's so unchallenging. So many Dylan records, you think, there's a big concept here, and I've got to. It's demanding. You know what I mean? And that's a really relaxing kind of low key record, isn't it? It's lots of lovely.
Yeah, it is, and you can live with it for a long time. I think we should be able to say the same about Rough and Rowdy Ways. I love it very much. I like it very much. I may love it one day. But Down in the Groove might take a bit longer, but we can keep working on that.
Shot of Love. Yeah.
I quite like Shot of Love. There you go. It's my give him enough rope.
Well, that's brilliant.
Gideon, it's been lovely to talk to you.
Likewise, very nice to catch up, James. And this is such a brilliant idea. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun.
It's a social service for everybody.
I look forward to the days when you are back in a public house talking to various authors, and may it come as soon as everybody's ready.
Okay. Gideon, all the very best.
Bye.
And
cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.